Announcements and discoveries continue to pour out of the open wound that is Game Freak on day 5 of the infamous Terror Leak. People have taken to calling it the Freak Leak, as in Game Freak Leak. I'm not sure how I feel about that. I'm going to continue calling it the Terror Leak, sometimes the GIGALEAK, because Freak Leak just sounds a little bit off to me. Full disclosure, I don't actually know how far along the leak we are anymore. I don't think a lot of people do. As announcements become a bit more scattered, less people are up to date. So generally, at this point, we're taking what we're given. Because I've heard that we are 50 gigabytes away from all of it being disclosed, or 100 gigabytes away, or we've only done 50 gigabytes and there's over 900 gigs to go. It's really difficult to keep up and know exactly how much is coming along. But generally, at the moment, leaked content can come out at any time. However, today the main focus is still on Generation 6, that's Pokemon X and Y. I generally think I'll continue to make GigaLeak focused videos as long as there's beta content for Pokemon X and Y coming out, because I am infatuated with these games. And knowing that there's content leaking from the very earliest stages of its development that's been lost media for over a decade, it's just fascinating to me. But let's have a little look through and see what's changed in the last 24 hours. Firstly, there's a very early Unova map sketch. It's not too early because you can kind of figure out everything is in its final position. From what we can make out, this is generally translates to the game one-on-one. Something immensely huge dropped in the world of Generation 6. A few days ago, 2 screenshots appeared of a very, very early build of Pokemon X and Y. Since then, there has been a version of X and Y going around that is free to download. That one is much more familiar, it's much closer to the original X and Y game. The screenshots that leaked were from a game that looked like Harvest Moon. This is, as far as we know, sort of between the Unova model stage and the playable build stage. There was a middle where they were experimenting with a chibi art style. All we had were these screenshots to go off, and now we have footage of this Harvest Moon beta demo for Pokemon X and Y. It includes a beta UI, a Black 2 and White 2-esque battle screen, it may even be the exact same one. New walk animations, new shiny sounds, everything. The main thing to note is just that the player model is different. It's just something as little as that is insane. And here we introduce ourselves to the Momiji test. This is the first and only example of leaked Generation 7 content. This is from the cutscene all the way at the end of the game when Lily is leaving for Kanto. I happen to remember somehow. It's fascinating to see. Some people are actually surprised to see that Game Freak storyboards its cutscenes. Like, isn't that just what you do? We have another absolute bombshell here. Now we know X and Y and Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire were being developed alongside each other. X and Y came out in 2013 and Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire, the remakes for Gen 3, came out in 2014, so like literally within a year of each other. Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire are generally considered to be way more content rich. Not only do they have all of the legendaries and this massive sprawling post-game, but they also have different mechanics like diving. Diving was introduced all the way back in Generation 3 on the GBA, and we saw it resurface for Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire. But this leaked footage shows that X and Y had a scrapped diving mechanic. You can see they're sort of testing out collision here. I can't actually think of when this would have been used, but I was absolutely gobsmacked when I woke up to this morning. Surprisingly, we're actually jumping back to Generation 5 now. There's a mural here of what seems to be an early version of Cofagrigus. Not exactly sure what to make of that. Don't even know where it is. There are a lot of beta sprites, they all look incredibly similar though. Bouncing back further to Generation 4, we can see that Heart Gold and Soul Silver gyms originally had their own distinctive designs to reflect the type that the gym was. Here we have 3 examples. I don't know why they stopped there. They were almost halfway through, and that's a really good idea. I mean, maybe development was tight. We have no idea. Centro and a few other leaking sources say that we could potentially get a massive X and Y developer documents leak on the scale of the one that came out with developer documents for the anime and the trade and card game. At the moment, nothing like that has actually come out. We have one example of concept art here, but this has been freely available for years. I don't actually remember where it came from. Here we have a beta version of the gym leader Bryson sprite, which is one of the most random things I could think of. And it compares it to the modern version. It looks different, surprisingly. One of the first things that I covered in day 1 or 2 was beta Shaman, and now we can see all of the Shaman sprites for both forms. Okay, we have a lot of beta designs for Pokemon that all look fake. If the Beta Arceus design I showed a few days ago ended up being fan art, all of these could be as well. But I'm showing them here just in case. They do look cool. There are 3 beta designs here that are confirmed, but that's because they didn't come out in this leak. They came out during the Gold and Silver leak like a few years ago. There's an early version of Sableye, this weird frog Pokemon, and this guy, Lombre, that was his name. 2 incredibly long videos came out, one showing the prototype ROM showcase for Pokemon Black, and the other showing someone running a beta build of Pokemon X and Y on a 3DS XL. The Hex Maniac in Pokemon X and Y had a beta model. There it is. Just one of many things we had no idea existed until today. There is no consistency in the order that these leaks come out anymore because we're going back to Black and White. We have high definition beta sprites for Zekrom and Reshiram, and also Kyurem, not only a beta in-game screenshot, but a high definition version. This looks nothing like the Kyurem we'd end up getting. Seeing a beta sprite like this that looks so utterly out of place, it's like having a window into another universe where that's what Kyurem looked like in Black and White. It's an incredibly strange way to end the day, but that's it. The main things here are absolutely the beta footage from the Harvest Moon beta build of Pokemon X and Y and the unused diving mechanic in Pokemon X and Y. These are 2 absolutely massive discoveries that I couldn't have ever dreamed of knowing. I'd like to end on a little correction. It isn't massively important, or I would have put it at the start, but there were basically these massive lore documents, one going around about Typhlosion, one about Slakoth, of people that went around killing Pokemon and stuff like that, and apparently they were internal developer lore documents. I passed them off because Pokemon and Nintendo, they have a code of ethics, and I don't know why they would have broken it behind the scenes. It turns out that all of these documents are dated, and if you look at the leaks in their entirety, it seems like they inserted Pokemon names into Greek mythology or made up stories like this and then narrowed it down, removed harmful elements, and they became the myths inside the Canalave library. Because in Pokemon Diamond and Pearl, in Canalave City, there's a library where you can read through books that have a lot of myths, and they're all quite outlandish. They were all about Pokemon and humans living together, so not too dissimilar from these lore documents. So they may have actually been dev tools after all. These are just them in their primal 18 plus form, and as soon as they were narrowed down and made more concise and succinct and friendly, then they became actual Pokemon mythology. So I can kind of see why people would think that. I'm still not bought by it, but apparently there was a lot more background information that I just looked over. Tomorrow will be day 6. Potentially we could get that X and Y concept art drop. Probably would have happened by now, but there is both a massive and a minimal amount of the leak to come because we don't know how much is left anymore. But I still personally hold the belief that we are past the worst of it now. Because days like 3 and 4 were absolutely huge, and now we're just getting little drops of knowledge. So unless something absolutely huge happens in the future, the Terra leak could slowly be becoming an afterthought, and I'm sure Game Freak is really hoping that's the case. Oh dear.